When my husband offhandedly said, "Your sister is remarkable, and you're just not enough for me," I coolly replied, "Then go to her." That same day, I discreetly canceled our plans, the gifts, everything. 2 weeks later, at 4 a.m., my sister called me sobbing, "Please answer. Something happened tonight, and it's about you." The sound of a zipper closing shouldn't feel like a death sentence. But that Friday evening, in the suffocating silence of our San Francisco apartment, that sharp metallic hiss cut through me. It wasn't just a sound, it was the brutal, undeniable end of the world I'd spent 15 years building, paying for, and quietly, desperately suffering in. It was the final, devastating punctuation mark on a decision I hadn't even known was being made. Stuart didn't look at me. He was too absorbed in admiring his shirts, the very shirts I'd ironed that morning before heading to my soul-crushing job, neatly tucked into the vintage leather suitcase. The one I'd bought him for his last birthday. Imported from Italy, it had cost more than my first car. He smoothed down a collar with a tenderness he hadn't shown me in a decade, checking its pockets, making sure his gold fountain pen was secure. He treated his possessions with a reverence he never, ever extended to his wife. "It's not just about space, Meredith," he finally said, his voice terrifyingly casual. Like he was ordering a coffee or discussing the weather. Not demolishing a marriage of 15 years. It's about vitality, energy, vibrational alignment. I stood by the kitchen island, gripping the cold marble counter until my knuckles turned bone white. The icy marble was the only thing grounding me in a reality that felt utterly surreal, a nightmare I couldn't wake from. "Vitality," I repeated, my voice flat, devoid of the primal scream clawing its way up my throat. "Is that what we're calling it now? Vibrational alignment." He finally turned. His eyes swept over my gray cardigan, my messy bun, the tired lines etched around my eyes. Lines he didn't know were there because I'd been up until 3 a.m., troubleshooting a crisis for a client in Tokyo. But he didn't see that. He just saw a tired, middle-aged housewife who paid the bills. He saw utility, not a partner. "Look at you, Meredith," he sighed, a sound heavy with deep, weary disappointment. "You just exist. You plow through life. You check boxes. You pay bills. You're comfortable. You're safe. But you're not remarkable." That word, remarkable. It landed like a physical slap, sucking the air from the room. "And who is remarkable, Stuart?" I asked, though a cold, heavy stone of sickness, growing in my stomach for months, already knew the answer. "Tabitha," he said. He didn't even have the decency to hesitate. Didn't flinch. "Your sister is. She's vibrant. She understands art. She understands passion. She makes me feel like I'm actually alive. She thinks I'm a genius." "Meredith, when was the last time you looked at me like I was a genius?" "Probably before I realized I was paying for your genius's lunch every single day for the last 10 years, I thought. But I didn't say it. Not yet." I held the words back, swallowing the bitter bile. "So," I said, forcing my voice to remain steady, refusing to let him see me shatter. "You're leaving me for my sister." "We have a connection," he said defensively, zipping the bag shut and lifting it off the bed. "She gets me. She understands the burden of being a creative soul in a capitalist world. And, honestly, Meredith, my friends, they've been saying it for years. That I settled. That I could do better. Tabitha is better. She's remarkable, and you're just not enough for me anymore." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating, filled with the ghosts of 15 years. The sacrifices, the secrets, the nights I'd cried silently in the bathroom so my sadness wouldn't disrupt his precious, creative flow. I looked at this man, wearing the cashmere sweater I'd bought him, standing in the living room I'd paid for, holding the keys to the car I leased in my name. And suddenly, the crushing weight on my chest vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. It was the feeling of a fever finally breaking. "Okay," I said. He blinked, caught off guard. "Okay, you think she's better?" I walked to the front door, pulling it wide open. The hallway air was chilly, carrying the scent of impending rain. "Then go to her. Go find better. But Stuart, don't ever come back. When you walk out this door, you are walking out of my life, my bank account, and my protection." He looked at me with a mix of confusion and pity. He probably expected tears. He expected me to beg, to cling to his leg, to promise I'd dye my hair or lose 10 pounds or suddenly develop more enthusiasm for his pretentious lectures on architecture. He expected the desperate Meredith he'd trained me to be. "I'll send for the rest of my things," he said, puffing out his chest as he walked past, dragging the suitcase wheels over the hardwood floor. "I need to find myself, Meredith. I need to be with someone who matches my level." "Goodbye, Stuart," I said. I closed the door. I locked the deadbolt. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood and listened to his footsteps fade down the hallway. Click, clack, click, clack, then the elevator dinged. Then silence. He was gone. My husband of 15 years was gone, off to sleep with my little sister. I didn't cry. I walked back to the kitchen island where my phone vibrated face down against the marble. A single notification. I picked it up. An email from my secure server. Subject: *wire transfer confirmation from Catalyst Ventures. Amount: $14,800,000. Status: completed. I stared at the number. $14.8 million. The final payout for the sale of MJ Solutions, the company I had built from nothing in the dark. While Stuart was busy finding himself and flirting with my sister, I looked around the now truly empty apartment. Stuart thought he was leaving a boring, unremarkable wife for a life of luxury and passion with my sister. He had no idea he had just walked away from the very bankroll that had supported his entire fantasy life. He thought I was nothing. He was about to find out I was everything. Before I tell you how I utterly destroyed his ego, piece by agonizing piece, I want to say thank you for being here, for listening. I'm sharing this because I know I'm not the only woman who has ever been underestimated. If you're still with me, by the way, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Trust me, there are more unbelievable stories coming, and you won't want to miss them. Now, to understand why I let him treat me like a doormat for so long, you have to understand Tabitha. You have to understand the family ecosystem we grew up in. In psychological terms, they call it the dynamic of the golden child and the scapegoat. In my house, we just called it Tabitha and Meredith. Tabitha was born when I was 4, and from the moment she arrived, she was the sun, and I was just the faint, background radiation of the universe. She was beautiful, yes. Blonde curls, big blue eyes, a laugh like wind chimes. I was sturdy. Brown hair, brown eyes, serious face. My mother used to say, Meredith is the responsible one. Meredith can handle it. Handle it became my life sentence. It became my identity. If Tabitha broke a vase, Meredith, why weren't you watching her? If Tabitha failed a math test, Meredith, you should have tutored her better. If Tabitha needed a prom dress, but money was tight, Meredith, you don't really need to go to math camp this summer, do you? Your sister needs this moment. It's her time to shine. I learned early on that my value lay in my utility. I was valuable only when I was fixing, paying, or cleaning up. Tabitha's value was inherent. She just had to exist to be adored. There's a specific memory that still haunts me. A memory that, looking back, was the blaring red flag I should have seen waving violently in the wind. It was 5 years ago, Thanksgiving. I had spent 3 days prepping. I brined the turkey for 24 hours in a mixture of herbs I grew myself. I made 3 types of pie from scratch because Stuart liked apple, my dad liked pumpkin, and Tabitha claimed to be gluten-free that month, so I made a specialized flourless chocolate torte just for her. I polished the silver until my fingers smelled like tarnish. I ironed the tablecloths. I paid for all the groceries, which had cost nearly $400, a sum that made me wince because Stuart hadn't had a commission in 6 months, and our rent was due. Tabitha arrived 2 hours late. She breezed through the door in a white cashmere coat that looked suspiciously expensive, bringing a gust of cold air and the scent of expensive designer perfume. Stuart, who had been sulking on the couch watching football while I wrestled a 20-pound bird out of the oven, literally jumped up like a puppy hearing a treat bag open. "Tabby," he exclaimed. He never called me nicknames. "You're here. The party can finally start. Sorry I'm late." Tabitha laughed, tossing her coat onto the chair I had just cleared. Traffic was a nightmare, and I just had to stop at this little boutique vineyard I found. Look. She held up a bottle of wine. It's a reserve Cabernet. The sommelier said it has notes of chocolate and arrogance. I thought it was perfect for us. My parents clapped. Literally clapped. Oh, Tabitha, you have such exquisite taste, my mother gushed, completely ignoring the feast I had spent 72 hours creating. She looked past the golden turkey, the steaming stuffing, the perfectly roasted vegetables. Meredith, get a corkscrew. Don't just stand there like a statue. I went to the kitchen, my hands shaking. I grabbed the corkscrew. As I walked back, I saw Tabitha's purse open on the counter. Inside, shoved carelessly next to her lipstick and a pack of mints, was a receipt. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. It was a receipt for the wine. $200. And below that, the payment method, Visa ending in 4598. My Visa. My blood ran cold. I had given her that card for emergencies only 3 months prior, when her car broke down and she claimed she was stranded on the highway in the middle of the night. She swore she'd destroyed it, cut it up. Instead, she used it to buy a $200 bottle of wine to impress my husband and my parents at the dinner I cooked and paid for. I walked into the dining room, holding the corkscrew like a weapon. Tabitha, I said, my voice trembling. You bought this with my card. The emergency card. The room went silent. But it wasn't the silence of shame for her. It was the silence of judgment for me. Tabitha's lip wobbled. A single, perfect tear rolled down her cheek. I just wanted to contribute, Meredith. I wanted to bring something special for everyone since you handled the basics. I didn't think you'd be so stingy about a gift for the family. It's Thanksgiving. It's not a gift if I'm paying for it. I snapped. And $200, Tabitha. That was for car repairs, not Cabernet. Meredith. My father slammed his hand on the table, making the silverware jump. Stop it. You're embarrassing your sister. It's a holiday. Why do you always have to make everything about money? You know Tabitha is going through a hard time finding herself right now. She stole from me, I whispered, looking around the table for just one ally. Just one. She's your sister, Stuart said. He was pouring the wine into his glass, swirling it, sniffing it with his eyes closed, savoring the bouquet of my stolen money. And honestly, Meredith, this wine is incredible. You should be thanking her for elevating the meal. The turkey looks a little dry anyway. I looked at them. My husband, drinking the wine I paid for, criticizing the food I cooked, defending the sister who stole from me. My parents, looking at me with disdain for ruining the vibe. I swallowed the scream building in my throat. It tasted like ash. I sat down. I ate the dry turkey. I drank water from the tap because Stuart drank the last of the wine. That was the dynamic. I was the wallet, the maid, the punching bag. Tabitha was the star, and Stuart? Stuart was the audience member who decided he wanted to be on stage with the star, not in the tech booth with the crew. But what none of them knew, what I kept hidden deep inside, was that while they were playing these petty, toxic games, I was building something real. Something that would eventually give me the power to buy and sell all of them. But first, I have to tell you how I met Stuart and how I let a mediocre man convince me that I was the lucky one. 15 years ago, I wasn't a secret millionaire. I wasn't a CEO. I was just Meredith, a 27-year-old technical copy editor with a sensible haircut, a sensible car, and a heart desperate to be loved. I was the girl who did everything right, but felt like everything was going wrong. I met Stuart at an art gallery opening in the Mission District. He was standing in front of a painting that looked like a spilled paint bucket, explaining loudly to anyone who would listen about negative space and urban decay. He was handsome in that starving artist way, tweed jacket with patches on the elbows, messy hair that looked intentional, intense eyes that promised depth. He told me he was an architect, a visionary. He corrected himself over cheap white wine in plastic cups. I don't just design buildings, Meredith. I design experiences. I want to change the skyline of San Francisco. I want to create structures that weep. Growing up as the boring one, I was mesmerized. I was attracted to his passion like a moth to a flame. I thought if I stood next to his fire, I would finally feel warm. I thought his vision would give my life color. We married a year later. It was a small ceremony because Stuart said weddings were bourgeois constructs designed to enforce patriarchal ownership, but mostly because he didn't have any money. I paid for the venue. I paid for the rings. I paid for the honeymoon in Big Sur. I told myself it was an investment in our future, our partnership. The reality of our marriage settled in quickly, like a fog rolling over the bay. Stuart refused to work for corporate firms. He said they stifled his creativity. He wanted to start his own boutique firm. I just need time, Meredith, he told me, his eyes wide and pleading over breakfast. Greatness can't be rushed. Can you handle the bills for a few months? Just until I get established. Once I land my first commission, I'll pay you back tenfold. We'll be a power couple. A few months turned into a year. Then 2. Then 5. I was working double shifts at a publishing house, editing dense technical manuals about HVAC systems and industrial plumbing just to keep the lights on. Every night, I'd come home exhausted, my eyes burning from staring at screens, and Stuart would be sitting at his drafting table, surrounded by crumbled paper, smelling of imported coffee. "How was your day?" I'd ask, dropping my heavy bag, stifling a yawn. "Stifling," he'd sigh, not even looking up. "The world isn't ready for my vision, Meredith. I had a meeting with a developer today. He wanted me to put gutters on the facade." Gutters? Can you imagine the insult to the line of the roof? "Did you take the job?" I asked hopefully. We were 2 months behind on rent, and the landlord was calling. "Of course not," he sneered, finally looking at me with disdain. "I have integrity. I'm not a contractor, Meredith. I'm an artist." Integrity didn't pay the landlord. I did. I pulled extra freelance gigs. I stopped buying clothes. I stopped getting haircuts. I remember one specific Tuesday that broke something inside me. I had just paid the rent using the last of my savings. I had $12 in my checking account until payday, which was 3 days away. I came home to find Stuart beaming. He was holding a heavy cardstock envelope. "I did it," he said. "I joined the prestigious City Club." My stomach dropped. "The City Club, Stuart? The membership fee is $2,000. "It's an investment," he insisted, waving the membership card. "That's where the clients are. That's where the money is." I put it on the credit card. "Don't worry, babe. You have to spend money to make money." We didn't have a joint credit card, or so I thought. He had taken out a card in my name, forging my signature on the application because his credit score was non-existent. I sat on the floor and cried. I cried for the money, but mostly I cried for the betrayal. "Oh, come on," he said, rolling his eyes as he stepped over me to get a glass of water. "Don't be so dramatic. You're always so anxious about money. It's unattractive. It kills the vibe. You need to have an abundance mindset, Meredith. You manifest poverty with your worry." An abundance mindset. That was rich, coming from a man who hadn't contributed a dime to the household in 3 years. But I stayed. Why? Because every time I thought about leaving, I heard my mother's voice. Meredith is the responsible one. Meredith can handle it. And because Stuart was an expert at crumbs. Just when I was about to break, he'd sketch a beautiful picture of me, or bring me a single wildflower and tell me I was his rock. "I couldn't do this without you," he'd whisper into my hair. "You make my art possible." I clung to that. I made myself small so he could feel big. I constructed a shield around his fragile ego because I thought that was what a good wife did. But the breaking point for my career, the moment that changed my destiny, didn't happen at home. It happened at the public library, where I went to work on weekends just to get away from Stuart's heavy sighs. I was sitting at a communal table, editing a disaster of a manuscript, when a woman sat down opposite me. She was crying. Not loud sobbing, but silent, terrified tears. She had a laptop open, and on the screen was a news article about a local tech startup CEO who had just tweeted something incredibly offensive and was currently being destroyed on the internet. I recognized the company. I recognized the PR disaster. And without thinking, I slid a box of tissues across the table and said, "He shouldn't delete the tweet. If he deletes it, he looks guilty. He needs to issue a video apology, but not from his office. From his living room, wearing a blue sweater to look trustworthy." and he needs to donate to a specific charity within the hour. The woman looked up, mascara running down her cheeks. Who are you? I'm nobody, I said. Just an editor. But I know how to fix broken stories. That woman was Jocelyn. She was the terrified junior PR assistant for that tech CEO. She took my advice. She called her boss. They did exactly what I said. The stock price stabilized by Monday morning. Jocelyn found me at the library the next weekend. She slammed a check onto the table. You saved my job, she said. And my boss wants to pay you a consulting fee. $5,000. $5,000. That was 3 months of rent. But Jocelyn lowered her voice, leaning in, her eyes shining with ambition. He has friends. Messy friends. Rich friends. They make mistakes, and they need people like you who can see the narrative and fix it. Meredith, I think we can build a business. That was the birth of MJ Solutions, and it was the beginning of my double life. When I brought home that first check for $5,000, my first instinct was to run to Stuart. I wanted to wave it in the air like a flag. I wanted to say, look, I'm valuable. I'm smart. I'm not just a drudge who edits HVAC manuals. But as I walked through the door, the air in the apartment was thick with tension. Stuart was pacing the living room, kicking at the rug. They rejected the proposal. He spat out before I could even take off my coat. Philistines. They went with some cookie-cutter firm because they were safer. I'm too avant-garde for this city, Meredith. I'm casting pearls before swine. He kicked the leg of the sofa so hard the lamp rattled. I feel like a failure, he muttered, sinking into the cushions, putting his head in his hands. I'm 30 years old and I'm a failure. Maybe I should just quit and work at Starbucks. I touched the check in my purse. If I showed him this, if I showed him that I had made in 1 hour what he hadn't made in 2 years, it wouldn't be a celebration. It would be an indictment. It would be proof that he was failing while I was succeeding. It would crush him, and his resentment would poison us. So, I kept the check in my purse. I'm so sorry, Stuart, I said, sitting next to him and rubbing his back. They don't deserve you. You're too good for them. The next day, I opened a separate bank account, an LLC, MJ Solutions. Jocelyn and I started working out of her tiny studio apartment, sitting on the floor with laptops, drinking cheap coffee. But the work was electric. Silicon Valley was booming, and with big money came big mistakes. Data breaches, executive affairs, leaked emails. I had a knack for it. I could look at a catastrophe and see the exit route. I understood how to manipulate language, how to bury a story, and how to spin a narrative. I was the fixer. While Stuart slept in until 10 a.m., waiting for inspiration, I was up at 5 a.m., coordinating with legal teams in London. While he played video games in the afternoon to decompress, I was on encrypted calls with CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, telling them exactly what to say to save their stock prices. The money started trickling in. Then it flowed. Then it poured. 6 months in, we landed a contract with a major social media platform to handle their crisis response protocol. The retainer was $20,000 a month. I remember sitting in my beat-up Honda Civic after signing that contract, shaking. I looked at the signature on the paper. I was rich. I was successful. And I had to go home to a husband who was currently asking me to cut back on groceries because he needed new drafting software. Living a double life is exhausting. I had to be 2 people. Outside the house, I was Meredith the Shark, the woman who made grown men tremble in boardrooms. Inside the house, I was Meredith the Mouse, the supportive wife who clipped coupons and nodded sympathetically when Stuart complained about the unfair world. The hardest part was hiding the money. I couldn't upgrade our apartment. I couldn't buy nice clothes. I couldn't wear expensive jewelry. Every dollar I made went into investment accounts, diversified portfolios, and offshore trusts that my lawyer, Vance, set up for me. Vance was a cynical genius who told me, "Protect yourself, Meredith. Men forgive many things, but they never forgive a wife who is more successful than they are." But sometimes I slipped. Sometimes I couldn't stand seeing him struggle when I had millions sitting in a bank account. 2 years into the business, Stuart's old car finally died. He was devastated. He lay on the floor, staring at the ceiling. "I can't even drive to meetings," he moaned. I'm trapped. I'm nothing. How can I be a visionary without wheels? I couldn't take it. I had just closed a $500,000 deal fixing a scandal for a biotech firm. Stuart, I said, making up the lie on the spot. My parents called. They sold some land in Oregon. They want to give us a gift. I took him to the dealership. I bought him a brand new Audi. Paid cash. I watched him walk around the car, touching the gleaming paint, smelling the leather interior. I waited for him to ask why my parents, who lived on a modest pension and complained about the price of milk, suddenly had $50,000 to drop on a car. I waited for him to question the logic. But he didn't. He didn't question it because he believed he deserved it. Finally, he said, sitting in the driver's seat and gripping the wheel, a car that matches my aesthetic. A car that tells clients I'm serious. This is what I was meant to drive. He never thanked my parents. He never thanked me. He just took the keys. And that became the pattern. I upgraded our life incrementally, always inventing a lie to cover the cost. New custom Italian leather furniture? I found it at an estate sale for pennies. Can you believe it? A luxury vacation to Italy? I won a contest at work. All expenses paid. I paid for 5-star hotels and first-class flights. His expensive tailored suits from Seville Row? There was a huge discount at the outlet because of a stitching error you can't even see. I was subsidizing his ego. I was building a stage, lighting the lights, and paying the audience just so he could pretend he was the star of the show. I was creating a monster, feeding it with my hard-earned money, and telling myself it was love. But the real danger didn't come from the lies I told Stuart. It came from the person I couldn't lie to fast enough. My sister, Tabitha. Tabitha had a nose for money like a shark has a nose for blood. She noticed the thread count of the sheets. She noticed the quality of the wine I served. She noticed that despite my complaints about bills, I never actually ran out of money. And about 3 years ago, she started circling. She sensed the abundance I was trying so hard to hide. And she wanted her piece of the pie. Tabitha's life was a masterclass in failing upward. She moved from one disaster to another, always landing on her feet because someone else, usually me, was there to catch her. She married a personal trainer who turned out to be broke, divorced him, tried to become an Instagram influencer, failed because she refused to post consistently, tried to start a jewelry line, got sued for copyright infringement, and then decided her true calling was wellness coaching. Through it all, she needed money. At first, it was small amounts. Meredith, I'm short on rent this month. Meredith, my car needs tires. Meredith, I need a new laptop for my brand. I paid them. It was easier to pay than to listen to my mother's guilt trips about how I was hoarding my stable income. But as Stuart and I approached our mid-40s, Tabitha started to change her strategy. She stopped asking me for money directly. She realized there was a weaker link in the chain. She started asking Stuart. I remember coming home one evening to find them huddled over Stuart's laptop on the sofa. They were sitting close. Too close. Tabitha's hand was resting on Stuart's forearm, her fingers tracing the fabric of his sleeve, casually picking off lint that wasn't there. "Oh, Meredith," Tabitha said, not moving her hand. Her voice was syrupy sweet. "Stuart was just helping me with a business plan. He's so brilliant with structure. He sees the big picture." "Brilliant," Stuart echoed, looking flushed and important. "Tabitha has a vision for a luxury wellness retreat in Napa. It's architectural gold, Meredith. She wants to use sustainable materials. I just need a seed investment," Tabitha said, turning her big, watery blue eyes on me. $10,000. That's all. Stuart thinks it's a guaranteed return." She clicked a button. A PowerPoint slide appeared. It was clearly a template she had downloaded 5 minutes ago. It had spelling errors. It had photos of yoga mats stolen from Google Images. It was a joke. "We don't have $10,000, I lied automatically, dropping my keys on the counter. Stuart frowned. "Well, actually, Meredith, I was looking at the joint savings account. We have about $12,000 in there. The rainy day fund." My blood boiled. That was the money I kept visible to him, the money I trickled in from my salary as an editor to simulate a normal savings rate. "That's for emergencies, Stuart. If the car breaks down, if one of us gets sick, not for hypothetical wellness retreats. You don't believe in me, Tabitha whispered, shrinking back into the sofa cushions, making herself look small and victimized. You never have. You're jealous because I have dreams and you just have spreadsheets. You hate that I want to fly. It's not jealousy, it's math. I snapped. And experience. Remember the jewelry line? Remember the dog walking app? You're being toxic, Stuart said, standing up to defend her. He placed a protective hand on her shoulder. This is family, Meredith. And honestly, I think it's a great idea. I believe in her. I told her we'd do it. You told her we would do it? I stared at him. Without asking me? I'm the head of this household, Stuart said, puffing out his chest, his voice dropping an octave to sound authoritative. I make executive decisions. I'm investing in talent. I looked at him. The man who hadn't paid a utility bill in a decade, calling himself the head of the household. The man whose executive decisions usually involved what topping to get on a pizza. I gave them the money, not because I respected his authority, but because I saw the way he looked at her. He looked at her like she was a damsel in distress, and he was the knight slaying the dragon. If I said no, I became the dragon. I thought if I gave the money, she would go away to Napa and leave us alone. I was wrong. She didn't go to Napa to build a retreat. She went to Napa to party. And apparently, Stuart went with her. It was 6 months ago. Stuart told me he had an architecture conference in San Francisco. Networking, he said, packing his overnight bag. Very important clients, developers from Dubai. I need to be on my A game. He was gone for 3 days. During those 3 days, Tabitha was posting incessantly on Instagram. Photos of vineyards, photos of expensive cheese plates, photos of 2 glasses of red wine clinking against a sunset. I zoomed in on one of the photos. In the corner of the frame, resting on the table, was a man's hand holding a cigar. I recognized the ring on the finger. It was the platinum band with the custom etching I bought Stuart for our 10th anniversary. My heart hammered against my ribs. I sat in my home office, surrounded by contracts for my company, and felt like the stupidest woman alive. When he came home, I asked him, "How was the conference?" "Exhausting," he said, avoiding my eyes as he unpacked. "Endless seminars, boring lectures, but I made some good contacts. I think I really impressed the guys from Dubai." "Did you see Tabitha?" "She was in Napa this weekend. It looked lovely." He froze for a fraction of a second. "Just a glitch in the matrix." "No," he said, turning his back to me to hang up a shirt. "Why would I see her? I was in the city." "Meredith, you're paranoid. You always try to connect dots that aren't there." He pulled a receipt out of his pocket and tossed it on the table. It was a parking stub from a San Francisco garage. "See? Proof. Stop being so insecure. It's unattractive. It makes you look old." I looked at the receipt. It was time-stamped for 1 hour on Friday morning. He had parked, got the receipt to create an alibi, and left. He had planned this. He had staged his lie. I didn't confront him then. Why? Because I was busy. MJ Solutions was in the middle of the most critical phase of acquisition talks with Catalyst Ventures. I was negotiating a $14 million deal. I was working 18-hour days. I didn't have the mental bandwidth to fight with a cheating husband. I told myself, just get the deal done, secure the money, protect the asset, then deal with Stuart, but I underestimated how brazen they had become. They weren't just sneaking around anymore. They were flaunting it. They were mocking me right to my face. And the climax of their cruelty happened exactly 1 week before he left me. The dinner party. It was supposed to be a celebration of Stuart's birthday. I had organized it, of course. I booked a table at Lucille's, a trendy French bistro in the city that Stuart loved because the portions were microscopic and the waiters were rude, which he mistook for European sophistication. I invited his friends, a group of creatives who all dressed in monochromatic black and complained about gentrification while sipping $20 cocktails paid for by their parents' trust funds. And, of course, Tabitha. I wore a navy blue dress I had owned for 5 years. It was elegant, appropriate, modest. It was the dress of a wife who supports, not a woman who shines. Tabitha walked in 20 minutes late, drawing every eye in the room. She was wearing a red slip dress that looked more like lingerie than clothing. It was skin-tight, backless, and screamed for attention. It was a dress that said, "Look at me. I'm the main character. Happy birthday, brother-in-law." She purred, leaning in to kiss Stuart on the cheek. She lingered there. Her bright red lipstick left a smudge on his jawline. He didn't wipe it off. He wore it like a badge of honor. We sat down. I was at the end of the table, near the waiter's station. Stuart sat in the middle, the king of the feast, with Tabitha immediately on his right. The conversation immediately turned to Stuart's genius. Stuart was telling us about his vision for the waterfront redevelopment. One of his friends, a failed sculptor named Julian, who wore a scarf indoors, said, "It's revolutionary. It's a tragedy that he's so constrained by the small minds in the city." "Constrained by?" I asked, taking a sip of water, trying to participate. "By the mundane." Julian sneered, looking directly at me with eyes that judged my entire existence. "By the need to play it safe. Artists need muses, Meredith. They need fire. They need chaos. They don't need domesticity." Tabitha laughed, a tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. She touched Stuart's arm, her fingers walking up his bicep. "Oh, Julian, don't be mean to Meredith. She tries her best. Someone has to balance the checkbook, right? While the rest of us dream in color, Meredith dreams in black and white." "I suppose," Stuart said. He looked at me, his eyes cold and detached. "Meredith is very practical. She keeps me grounded. Sometimes a little too grounded. Like an anchor dragging in the mud. Or a ball and chain." Tabitha giggled. The whole table laughed. It wasn't a friendly laugh. It was a pack of hyenas laughing at the wounded gazelle. I felt heat rising up my neck, a flush of humiliation. "I'm not an anchor, Stuart. I'm the boat. Without the boat, you'd drown. You'd be treading water in the middle of the ocean." "Boo. Touchy." Tabitha mocked. "See? No sense of humor. Stuart needs someone who can laugh, someone who can run with him, someone who understands that life is about more than just paying bills." I dropped my napkin. It was an accident. My hands were shaking with suppressed rage. "I'll be right back," I said, needing to escape the suffocation of their ridicule. Needing to breathe air that didn't smell of their expensive perfume and condescension. I bent down to pick up the napkin from the floor, and that's when I saw it. The tablecloth was long, draped almost to the floor. Under the table, in the dim light, I saw Stuart's hand resting on Tabitha's knee. Her legs were crossed, leaning toward him. His thumb was stroking her skin, a slow, intimate, possessive rhythm. Up and down. Up and down. They weren't just flirting. They weren't just having an emotional affair. They were together. Right here. In front of me. At the dinner I was paying for. I stayed under the table for a second longer than necessary, breathing through the nausea that threatened to empty my stomach. I saw everything clearly then. The disrespect, the theft, the betrayal. It wasn't just that they were cheating. It was that they were doing it while I sat 2 feet away, paying for their champagne. I sat back up. My face was pale, but my eyes were dry. "Is everything okay, Meredith?" Stuart asked, looking bored. "You look like you've seen a ghost. Don't tell me you're getting a migraine. You always get migraines at parties." "I'm fine," I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "Just a moment of clarity." "Typical," Tabitha muttered into her wine glass. "Always bringing down the mood." I sat through the rest of that dinner. I watched them touch. I listened to them insult me. I watched Stuart feed Tabitha a piece of dessert from his fork. I paid the $600 bill with the card Stuart thought was backed by my freelance savings. But in my head, I was already gone. In my head, I was calculating. I realized then that simply leaving him wasn't enough. Divorce wasn't enough. If I just divorced him, he would play the victim. He would try to take half of everything, claiming he contributed to my success by supporting me. He would use my money to fund his life with Tabitha. They would laugh about me in my own house. No, I needed a nuclear option. I needed to make sure that when I left, I took the floorboards with me, so they would fall straight into the basement. I needed to shatter his reality so thoroughly that he would never be able to piece his ego back together. When we got home that night, Stuart was buzzing with adrenaline. "Great night," he said, loosening his tie. "Did you see how Tabitha charmed everyone? She really lights up a room. You could learn a thing or two from her social skills, Meredith." "She certainly does," I said, turning off the lights. "She lights everything on fire." 1 week later, he packed his bags. He thought he was discarding me. He didn't know I had already unlocked the cage and was just waiting for him to walk out so I could bolt the door behind him and watch him starve in the wild. The morning after Stuart left, I didn't spend the day crying in bed, eating ice cream. I didn't call my friends to sob about being abandoned. I spent it in the glass-walled office of Vance and Associates, the most ruthless divorce firm in San Francisco. Vance was a shark in a three-piece bespoke suit. He had sharp eyes and a smile that terrified opposing counsel. He had been my corporate attorney for MJ Solutions, protecting my intellectual property, but today he was wearing his divorce hat. "So," Vance said, leaning back in his leather chair, tapping a gold pen against the desk. "He's gone. And the wire transfer from Catalyst Ventures just hit your separate account." "Yes," I said. $14.8 million. It cleared this morning. And he knows nothing. He thinks I'm a freelance copy editor making $40,000 a year. He thinks I clip coupons because I have to, not because I'm hiding assets." Vance smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was a predatory smile. "Perfect. Now, let's talk strategy. California is a community property state. Usually, everything acquired during the marriage is split 50-50. If he finds out about the money, he'll want $7 million. He'll argue he supported your career, that he was the wind beneath your wings." "He's not getting a dime," I said, my voice hard. "He was the anchor around my ankles." "That's why we have the ironclad post-nup," Vance said, tapping a thick file on his desk. "We prepared for this years ago. When I started making real money, Vance had advised me to set up a post-nuptial agreement. At the time, I told Stuart it was to protect him from my potential business debts because I was taking on risky freelance contracts. I told him I didn't want his credit score to be ruined if I failed." Stuart, terrified of debt and protective of his precious credit score, had signed it without reading it. He thought he was protecting himself from my failure. In reality, he had signed away his right to any future assets derived from my separate property business entity. "The post-nup is solid," Vance confirmed. "But we need to be careful. If he can prove he contributed to the business, even emotionally or by giving you advice, he will challenge it." "Did he ever help you name the company? Design a logo?" I asked. "He called my work typing for pennies. He never asked me a single question about my business in 10 years. I have diaries. I have witnesses. Jocelyn will testify that he thought she was my yoga instructor." "Good. Now, let's look at the joint accounts." Vance pulled up the forensic accounting report on a large screen on the wall. It was an autopsy of our marriage in numbers, a spreadsheet of betrayal. "Here," Vance pointed to a series of withdrawals highlighted in red. $500 here, $2,000 there, hotels in Napa, dinners at steakhouses, jewelry stores. "Tabitha," I whispered. "We traced the transactions," Vance said. "He's been paying for your sister's apartment for the last 6 months using the joint savings account, the money you deposited. He withdrew it as cash or consulting expenses, but we matched the amounts to her rent checks." I stared at the screen. The betrayal was mathematical now. Indisputable. He had used my money I worked 80-hour weeks for, to set up a love nest for my sister. He had funded his affair with my paycheck. "That's dissipation of marital assets," Vance said. "We can claw that back. But Meredith, we can do more than just win in court. We can destroy his narrative." "How?" "He's an architect, right? Or he claims to be. His reputation is his currency. He relies on the perception of success. If the world knows he's a fraud who leached off his wife while sleeping with her sister, if the world sees the receipts, he's finished. No one will trust him." I thought about it. I thought about the golden child and the scapegoat. I thought about the Thanksgiving dinner. I thought about the red dress. I thought about the 15 years I spent making myself small so he could feel big. "I don't just want to win, Vance," I said. "I want him to feel it. I want him to know exactly what he threw away. I want him to see the $14 million and know he can't touch a cent of it. I want him to understand that the boring wife was the CEO all along. Then we proceed with the reveal, Vance said. But you have to be cold. No emotion. You let him dig his own grave. You let him think he's winning until the trap shuts. Don't worry, I said, standing up and smoothing my skirt. My heart is ice. I cried all my tears years ago. I went home. I changed the locks on the door, not to keep him out, but to make a point. I packed up his remaining things, his mediocre sketches, his expensive sculpting tools, his collection of pretentious vinyl records he never listened to. I put them in boxes by the door. I was ready for war. But first, I had to deal with the flying monkeys. In narcissistic family systems, when the scapegoat finally stops accepting the abuse, the abuser sends out the flying monkeys, people recruited to guilt-trip the victim back into submission. They are the enablers, the ones who say, but it's family, to excuse the inexcusable. My mother called me 3 days after Stuart left. I saw her name on the caller ID and felt that old, familiar knot of dread in my stomach. The conditioning of 40 years is hard to break. The instinct to pick up, fix it, apologize, was strong. I picked up. Meredith. My mother's voice was sharp, cutting through the line. What is this I hear about you kicking Stuart out? He left me, Mom, I said calmly, putting the phone on speaker as I poured myself a glass of expensive wine. Wine I didn't have to hide anymore. He packed a bag and left. He's with Tabitha. I waited for the outrage. I waited for her to say, my God, your sister did what? That's horrible. Are you okay? Instead, there was a long sigh. A sigh that implied I was the problem. Oh, Meredith, you know how Tabitha is. She's impulsive. She feels things deeply. She follows her heart. She doesn't think about consequences like you do. She's sleeping with my husband, Mom. Well, it takes two to tango, she snapped. Stuart called me. He sounded devastated. He said you were cold. He said you drove him away with your lack of warmth. He said he found comfort in Tabitha because she understands his artistic soul. He said you made him feel small. His artistic soul? I laughed. A harsh, jagged sound that startled even me. Mom, he's a 45-year-old man who hasn't paid a bill since 2010. He's a leech, and Tabitha is a thief. Don't speak about your husband that way. And don't speak about your sister that way. Look, this is a mess, but we need to handle it like a family. Tabitha called me, too. She's crying. She says she loves him. She says they are soulmates. She says they've finally found happiness. I don't care what she says. Meredith, listen to me. You are the strong one. You always have been. Tabitha is fragile. If you make a scene, if you divorce him and make this public, it will destroy her reputation. She's trying to build her wellness brand. She can't handle a scandal. So, you want me to do what? Stay married to him while he lives with her? Keep paying his bills? No, don't be ridiculous. But maybe you could support them for a while. Just until they get on their feet. Stuart says he was cut off from the bank account. He can't even buy groceries. You have that steady job. You can afford to help them. Be the bigger person, Meredith. Do it for the family. Do it for me. I'm getting old. I can't handle the stress. The room spun. My mother was asking me to fund my husband's affair with my sister because I was the strong one. Because I was the wallet. She was protecting the golden child even as she destroyed the scapegoat. Something inside me snapped. It was the final tether that held me to my biological family. The last thread of guilt severed. No, I said. Excuse me. No. I'm not sending money. I'm not being the bigger person. I'm not fixing this. And I'm not keeping quiet. Meredith. If you do this, if you turn your back on your sister when she needs you. She stole my husband, Mom. I yelled, finally losing my cool. She didn't borrow a sweater. She stole my life. And you were helping her. You always were selfish, my mother hissed, showing her true face. Always keeping score. Fine. If you want to be alone, be alone. But don't come crying to us when you realize money can't buy you love. You're right, I said, my voice dropping to a deadly whisper. Money can't buy love. But it can buy a really expensive lawyer. And it can buy silence. Goodbye, Mom. I hung up. I blocked her number. Then I scrolled down and blocked my father's number too. I sat in the silence of my apartment. I was an orphan now. A 42-year-old orphan with $14 million and a heart full of gasoline. My phone pinged. A text from Stuart. Asterisk Meredith, I know you're hurting, but cutting off the credit card was petty. I need to buy sketching supplies for a new project. Can we meet? We need to talk about the divorce settlement. I want to keep this amicable. I think I deserve spousal support given how much I sacrificed for your career. Asterisk, he wanted to talk about a settlement. He thought there was a pot of gold at the end of this rainbow for him. He thought he could guilt me into paying him alimony. I smiled. A plan formed in my mind. A cruel, beautiful plan. I wouldn't just meet him for coffee. I wouldn't just send an email. I would give him exactly what he wanted, a stage. I typed back, you're right. I've been petty. I want to make peace. Your birthday is coming up this Saturday. I had already booked the private room at Atelier Rousseau. The deposit is non-refundable. Why don't you bring Tabitha and your friends? One last dinner. We can discuss the separation terms there. I have a proposal for you that I think will solve everyone's financial problems. The 3 dots appeared immediately. He was typing. He was eager. Asterisk, that sounds mature, Meredith. I'm glad you're seeing reason. Atelier Rousseau? Wow. I've always wanted to go there. We'll be there. Tabitha will be happy to clear the air. Asterisk, he took the bait. He thought he was coming to a surrender ceremony. He thought I was going to hand him a check. He didn't know he was walking into an execution. The days leading up to the dinner at Atelier Rousseau were the longest of my life, but also the most exhilarating. For the first time in 15 years, I wasn't pacing the floor, worrying about how to pay a bill or how to soothe Stuart's fragile ego. I was moving with the cold, calculated precision of a general preparing for a final strike. I met with Jocelyn at the restaurant 2 days before the event. Atelier Rousseau isn't just a restaurant. It's a fortress of culinary pretension in the heart of San Francisco's financial district. It has dark velvet walls, lighting that makes everyone look rich, and a waiting list that usually requires a blood sacrifice. I walked in wearing a trench coat and sunglasses, feeling like a spy in my own life. Everything is set up, Jocelyn whispered, guiding me to the private dining room I had reserved. It was called the Vault, a fitting name for what was about to happen. It was soundproof, lined with wine bottles worth more than my parents' house, and dominated by a long mahogany table. But the most important feature was the 80-inch screen mounted discreetly on the far wall, usually used for corporate slideshows or sentimental anniversary montages. We tested the connection, Jocelyn said, opening her laptop. The presentation is loaded. The audio from the private investigator is synced to slide 42. The resolution is 4K. They are going to see every pixel of their own destruction. I ran my hand over the polished wood of the table. And the seating chart arranged exactly as you asked, she said. Stuart at the head, facing the screen. Tabitha to his right. You at the opposite end, controlling the clicker. The friends, Julian, Chloe, and Marcus, filling the sides. Perfect. I looked at the menu proofs. I had pre-ordered the chef's table experience, a 12-course tasting menu that cost $450 per person, excluding the wine pairings. You really want to feed them? Jocelyn asked, raising an eyebrow. After what they did? I want them comfortable, I said, staring at the menu item for Wagyu beef with truffle foam. I want them fat and happy and drunk on expensive wine. I want them to feel like they've won. The fall is much harder when you're standing on top of a mountain of luxury. I went home to my empty apartment, which felt less empty and more spacious by the hour, and finalized the presentation. This wasn't just a slideshow. It was a forensic autopsy of my marriage. I had spent nights with Vance's team, digging through 10 years of bank statements, credit card bills, and emails. I had created graphs. I had scanned receipts. I had timeline overlays showing exactly where I was working versus where Stuart was spending. But the hardest part wasn't the math, it was the acting. I had to play the part of the defeated wife one last time. Stuart texted me on Friday night, just confirming for tomorrow. Tabitha is a bit nervous. She hopes you won't make a scene. She's very sensitive. I stared at the screen, marveling at the audacity. She sleeps with my husband, moves into an apartment paid for with my money, and she is the sensitive one? I typed back, tell her not to worry. The evening is about closure. I just want everyone to be happy. I've ordered the vintage Bordeaux she likes. You're a good woman, Meredith, he replied. I knew you'd understand eventually. He really believed it. He really believed that I was so desperate for his approval, so conditioned to be the doormat, that I would buy them dinner to apologize for them betraying me. That night, I stood in front of the mirror, practicing my face. I practiced the sad, resigned smile. I practiced the slumped shoulders. I practiced the look of a woman who has accepted her place as the unremarkable background character. But behind my eyes, there was something new. A spark. A fire. I looked at the woman in the mirror, 42, lines of wisdom around her eyes, strength in her jaw, and I whispered, tomorrow you burn it all down. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the middle of my king-size bed, listening to the city hum outside, thinking about every time Stuart had shushed me, every time Tabitha had borrowed clothes and returned them stained, every time my mother had told me to be more understanding. I thought about the $14.8 million sitting in my secret account. Money doesn't buy happiness, they say. But lying there in the dark, I realized that was a lie poor people told to feel better. Money buys options. Money buys security. And in my case, money was about to buy the most spectacular justice San Francisco had ever seen. The sun rose on Saturday morning. It was a gray, foggy day, perfect weather for a funeral. And that's what tonight was. A funeral for Stuart's ego. I arrived at Atelier Rousseau 30 minutes early. I wanted to be seated, composed, and controlling the space before they walked in. I wore the same navy blue dress I had worn to the disastrous dinner a week ago, the boring dress. I wanted to look exactly how they remembered me, predictable, safe, invisible. Jocelyn was hidden in a booth in the main dining room, acting as my backup. If anything went wrong or if Stuart got violent, she had security on speed dial. I sat at the foot of the long mahogany table in the vault. The room smelled of expensive lilies and old money. Hey, waiter poured me a glass of sparkling water. We are ready for the presentation whenever you are, madam, he whispered. I had tipped him $500 beforehand to ensure absolute cooperation. Thank you, Henry. Just wait for my signal. At 7:15 p.m., they arrived. I heard them before I saw them. Tabitha's laugh, that high-pitched, wind chime sound that used to make me smile, but now sounded like nails on a chalkboard, echoed down the corridor. The door opened. Stuart walked in first. He looked expansive. He was wearing a new suit, one I knew I hadn't paid for, which meant he had probably put it on a credit card he assumed I would eventually pay off. He scanned the room, taking in the crystal chandeliers, the velvet chairs, the sheer opulence of it all. Wow, he breathed. Meredith, you really went all out. Tabitha slinked in behind him. If her dress last week was inappropriate, this one was a declaration of war. It was white. A white lace strapless cocktail dress that looked disturbingly bridal. She was clinging to Stuart's arm with both hands. Behind them trailed the flying monkeys, Julian the failed sculptor, Chloe the poet who lived off her parents, and Marcus, Stuart's college roommate, who had always looked at me like I was the help. Hi, Meredith, Tabitha said, her voice dripping with faux sweetness. She didn't let go of Stuart. This place is insane. I can't believe we got a reservation. You must have called in a serious favor. I pulled some strings, I said softly, gesturing to the seats. Please sit. Happy birthday, Stuart. Stuart took the seat at the head of the table, the power seat. Tabitha sat to his right. The friends filled in, looking at me with that specific mix of pity and contempt people reserved for the ex-wife who doesn't know when to quit. So, Julian said, unfolding his napkin. We were just saying in the Uber how mature this is. Conscious uncoupling, right? Very Gwyneth Paltrow. Something like that, I said. It's good that you're accepting reality, Meredith, Chloe chimed in, reaching for the bread basket. Stuart and Tabitha, their energy is just undeniable. It's quantum physics. You can't fight physics. No, I agreed, gripping my water glass under the table. You certainly can't fight physics. Or math. The sommelier arrived to pour the first course pairing, a crisp champagne. Stuart and Tabitha toasted, raising their glasses high. To new beginnings. To following your heart. And to leaving the past behind. She looked directly at me when she said the past. To Stuart, the table echoed. Stuart beamed. He looked like a king holding court. He looked at me down the length of the table with a benevolent smile. Thank you, Meredith, he said. Really, this means a lot. I know things have been rocky, but I'm glad we can be civilized. I want us to be friends. I want you to be part of our lives. Maybe you can even help Tabitha with her business plan. You're good at the boring paperwork stuff. I almost laughed. The audacity was breathtaking. He was leaving me, sleeping with my sister, and in the same breath asking me to do her paperwork. We can talk about all of that, I said, my voice steady. But first, let's eat. I ordered the tasting menu. I think you'll love the third course. It's called Smoke and Mirrors. The dinner proceeded. I watched them eat my food. I watched Tabitha feed Stuart a bite of scallop. I watched Marcus whisper something to Julian while looking at me and snickering. They drank bottle after bottle of wine. They got louder. They got more arrogant. They forgot I was there. Or rather, they treated me like the furniture, functional, necessary, but easily ignored. I'm thinking of expanding the firm, Stuart announced loudly during the duck course. Now that I have the right creative environment, Tabitha and I are looking at lofts in Soma. Something with exposed brick. Expensive, but worth it for the inspiration. How will you pay for it? I asked quietly. The table went silent for a second. Oh, Meredith, Stuart sighed, rolling his eyes. Always the bean counter. Money is energy. It flows. When you align your chakras, the resources appear. Besides, we'll work out the settlement details. I'm sure you want to be fair. Fair? I repeated. Yes, fairness is very important to me. By the time dessert arrived, a chocolate sphere that melted when hot caramel was poured over it, they were drunk and complacent. They were bloated with arrogance. Meredith, Stuart said, leaning back and patting his stomach. This was amazing. You really outdid yourself. It's a nice send-off. It's not quite over, I said, standing up. The room quieted. I prepared something, I said, walking toward the wall with the screen. A little presentation. Since we're all here, since we're discussing the future and the past. Oh, God, Tabitha groaned. Is it a photo montage? Please tell me it's not pictures of your wedding. That would be so cringe. Not exactly, I said. I pulled a sleek metal remote from my pocket. I signaled Henry, the waiter, who dimmed the lights. Stuart, I said, my voice changing. The softness was gone. The boring wife timbre was replaced by the voice I used to negotiate multi-million-dollar contracts. You said I wasn't remarkable. You said I lacked ambition. You said I was holding you back. Meredith, don't make a speech, Stuart warned, looking uncomfortable. I'm not making a speech, I said. I'm making a statement. I clicked the button. The screen blazed to life. But it wasn't a picture of us. It wasn't a memory. It was a logo. Sharp, modern, metallic gold against a black background. Asterisk MJ Solutions. Crisis Management and Brand Strategy. Asterisk, what is this? Julian asked, squinting. Is this your new blog? Next slide, I said. I clicked again. The screen shifted. A graph appeared. A line graph that started flat and then shot upward like a rocket, climbing into numbers that made people in that room dizzy. Asterisk annual revenue. Year 1, $120,000. Year 2, $850,000. Year 3, $2,400,000. Year 4, $6,500,000. Current YDD, $14,200,000. Asterisk the room was silent. Not the polite silence of a dinner party, but the confused, heavy silence of people trying to solve a puzzle in a language they didn't speak. What are we looking at? Stuart asked, his voice slurring slightly from the wine. Whose company is this? Mine, I said. The word hung in the air, simple and devastating. Tabitha let out a high, incredulous laugh. Yours, Meredith? You edit HVAC manuals. You fix typos for a living. I haven't edited a manual in 10 years, Tabitha, I said, walking slowly toward the head of the table. While you were trying to become an influencer and Stuart was finding his vision, I was building the premier crisis management firm in Silicon Valley. You know that scandal with the tech giant CEO last year, the one that disappeared from the news in 48 hours? I did that. You know the data breach at Social Corp that never impacted their stock price? I fixed that. I clicked the remote again. A slide appeared titled, Client List Redacted. Even with the names blacked out, the logos were recognizable. Fortune 500 companies, major tech platforms, international banks. I am the fixer that people whisper about, I said, looking directly at Stuart. I am the woman CEOs call at 3 a.m. when their world is burning. And I built it all from our spare bedroom while you were sleeping in. Stuart's face was losing its color. He looked from the screen to me, trying to reconcile the boring wife he knew with the titan standing in front of him. You're lying, he whispered. You would have told me. We're married. We're partners. Partners share burdens, I said. Partners don't call their wives unremarkable. Partners don't sleep with their sisters. I clicked again. Asterisk press release. Embargoed until today. Catalyst Ventures acquires MJ Solutions for $28 million. Founder Meredith J. to retain seat on board. Asterisk the number was in bold. $28 million. The deal closed yesterday morning, I said. My personal payout, after taxes and paying out my partner Jocelyn, hit my separate account just as you were zipping up your suitcase. I clicked to the next slide. A screenshot of my bank account balance. Available balance, $14,842,000. The collective gasp in the room was audible. Julian dropped his fork. It clattered loudly against the china. Tabitha's mouth fell open, her eyes darting back and forth between the screen and me, calculating, computing, realizing. $14 million? Tabitha squeaked. Her voice was thin, terrified. $14.80, I corrected. Almost $15. Stuart stood up. His legs were shaky. He looked like a man who had just been hit by a truck, but hadn't realized he was bleeding yet. Meredith, he said, his voice trembling. Baby, why didn't you say anything? This is amazing. We're rich. We can, the firm, the loft. He took a step toward me, his hands reaching out, his face transforming from confusion to a desperate, greedy hope. I knew you were special. Deep down, I always knew you had this hidden depth. That's why I pushed you. I pushed you to be great. I laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. Sit down, Stuart. But we need to celebrate, he stammered. Champagne. Waiter. More champagne. My wife is a genius. I said, sit down. I barked. The command cracked like a whip. He sat. You think this is for you? I asked, gesturing to the screen. You think this money is ours, Stuart? Look at the date on the account opening. Look at the corporate structure. I clicked again. Asterisk post-nuptial agreement. Clause. Any assets derived from MJ Solutions LLC are the sole and separate property of Meredith J. Asterisk the document appeared on the screen, magnified. His signature was at the bottom. You signed this 7 years ago, Stuart, I said. You didn't read it because you were too busy worrying that my little freelance hobby would ruin your credit score. You signed away your right to every single cent. No, he whispered. That's not legal. I didn't know. It's very legal, I said. And Vance is very expensive. But that's not the best part. The best part is the next section. I leaned in, placing my hands on the table, looming over him. You see, Stuart, I was willing to share. For a long time, I was planning to surprise you. I was saving it for our anniversary. I was going to buy you that firm you wanted. I was going to give you everything. I saw the pain in his eyes, the realization of what he had lost. But then I continued, you started sleeping with my sister. And worse, you started spending my money on her. I pointed the clicker at the screen like a weapon. Now, I said, let's look at the receipts. The atmosphere in the room shifted from shock to horror. The friends were shifting in their seats, looking for the exit, but the door was closed, and Henry was standing in front of it with his arms crossed. They were trapped in my masterclass. You told everyone I was stingy, I said, pacing the length of the table. You told your friends I was a ball and chain who counted every penny. Let's see where the pennies went. I clicked the remote. An Excel spreadsheet appeared. It was color-coded. Red for Stuart, pink for Tabitha. This, I pointed to a column, is the rainy day fund, the money I pretended to save from my editing jobs. In reality, I was depositing $5,000 a month into it to keep the lights on while you played architect. The rows scrolled down. Asterisk March 12th, the Ritz-Carlton, Napa, $1,200, Stuart and Tabitha. March 14th, Chanel Boutique, $3,400, handbag for Tabitha. April 2nd, cash withdrawal, $5,000, consulting fee deposited to Tabitha's account, asterisk, you stole from the joint account. I said to Stuart, you took the money I put there for our mortgage and used it to buy her a purse. I turned to Tabitha. She was pale, clutching her napkin to her chest. And you, I said. The golden child. You told Mom you were building a business. You told Stuart you needed seed money. I clicked. Asterisk Tabitha's business expenses, Sephora, $800. Revolve Clothing, $1,200. VIP tickets to Coachella, $2,000. Rent for apartment in the marina, $1,500 per month. Asterisk, you didn't start a business, I said. You started a lifestyle. On my dime. Stuart said he had it covered. Tabitha shrieked, her voice cracking. He told me he was closing deals. He said he was successful. He lied, I said simply. He hasn't closed a deal in 6 years. Every steak you ate, every glass of wine you drank, every thread of clothing on your back right now. I paid for it. I turned to the friends. Julian, Chloe, Marcus. And you three, I said. They froze. Julian, I said. Remember that gallery exhibition you had? The one where you sold 3 sculptures and told everyone you were finally arriving. I clicked. A cancelled check appeared. Asterisk buyer, anonymous trust. Amount, $15,000. Asterisk, I bought them, I said. Stuart begged me. He said you were depressed. He said if you didn't sell something, you'd quit art. So I bought your ugly, twisted metal scraps and put them in storage. You're not a genius, Julian. You're a charity case. Julian's face went crimson. He slumped down in his chair, looking like he wanted to dissolve. And Marcus, I continued. The loan Stuart gave you for your crypto investment? That was my bonus from the tech giant crisis. I looked at all of them. You all sat here tonight, drinking my wine, eating my food, and laughing at me. You called me boring. You called me unremarkable. But the only reason any of you are sitting in this room, wearing those clothes, living this fantasy life, is because I was working. I turned back to Stuart. He was crying. Not the silent, dignified tears of a movie star, but ugly, snotty, heaving sobs. Meredith, please, he blubbered. I didn't know. I'm sorry. I messed up. We can fix this. I love you. I've always loved you. Tabitha was just a mistake. A midlife crisis. It meant nothing. Nothing, Tabitha screeched. She stood up, knocking her chair over. You told me you loved me. You told me Meredith was a frigid who didn't understand you. You told me you were going to leave her and we would travel the world. Shut up, Tabitha, Stuart yelled. You seduced me. You made me think I was special. But you're just a leech. Look at what you cost me. $14 million. The alliance was crumbling. The rats were eating each other. It's not just the money, Stuart, I said, my voice cutting through their screaming match. It's the disrespect. It's the fact that you looked at me every day for 15 years and didn't see me. You saw a wallet. You saw a maid. I clicked the remote one last time. But just in case you think Tabitha really loved you, I said. Just in case you think she was in it for your soul. What is this? Stuart asked, wiping his nose. This, I said, is a recording from the private investigator I hired when I first suspected the affair. This was recorded 3 weeks ago, while at brunch, when Tabitha was with her friends. I pressed play. The audio boomed through the high-quality speakers of the vault. The sound of clinking silverware and background chatter filled the room. Then Tabitha's voice, clear as a bell, cut through the noise. God, he's so exhausting. Audio Tabitha complained. He talks about architecture for hours. I just nod and say, wow, babe, you're a visionary. It's pathetic. Another female voice laughed. So why are you with him? He's kind of old, isn't he? He's old and he's soft, Audio Tabitha sneered. And in bed? Let's just say it's a lot of effort for very little reward. But, she paused, likely taking a sip of a mimosa, he controls the money. His wife is this mousy little thing who works all the time, and he has access to the accounts. He bought me the Cartier bracelet yesterday. I figure I'll stick around until he convinces her to divorce him and give him half. Then I'll take my cat and go to Bali with a hot surfer. You're evil. The friend laughed. I'm practical, Audio Tabitha said. Stuart is a stepping stone. A squishy, needy, bald spot-hiding stepping stone. The audio cut off. The silence in the room was absolute. It was heavier than the silence after the revenue reveal. This was the silence of total humiliation. Stuart slowly turned his head to look at Tabitha. His face was a mask of betrayal. The man who had just told me Tabitha understood his soul had just heard her call him a squishy stepping stone. You, Stuart whispered. You said I was a god. Tabitha's face was bright red. She looked trapped. She looked at the door, then at me, then at Stuart. It was taken out of context, she stammered. I was drunk. I didn't mean it. Meredith doctored the tape. She's using AI. It's not AI, Tabitha, I said calmly. It's you. It's always been you. Shallow, selfish, grasping. Stuart stood up, his chair scraped violently against the floor. You used me, he screamed at her. I left my wife for you. I left $14 million for you. And you think I'm pathetic? You are pathetic. Tabitha screamed back, abandoning the innocent act. Her face twisted into a snarl. Look at you. You're a loser, Stuart. Meredith was right. You haven't made a dime in years. You drove a car she paid for, lived in a house she paid for, and bought me gifts with her money. You're not a provider. You're a parasite. And what are you? I interjected, enjoying the show. A parasite on a parasite. Stuart looked like he was going to have a stroke. His veins were bulging. He looked at me, his eyes wide and pleading. Meredith, he choked out. You see? You see what she is? I was tricked. I was a victim here, too. Please take me back. We can go to counseling. I can change. I'll sign a new postnup. Just don't leave me with her. Don't leave me with nothing. I looked at him. I looked at the man I had loved for 15 years, and I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just the mild annoyance one feels when stepping on gum. It's too late, Stuart, I said. The divorce papers are already filed. Vance served them to your lawyer this morning, along with the eviction notice. Eviction? The apartment. The lease was in my name, I said. I terminated it yesterday. You have 48 hours to vacate. And since you used joint funds for unauthorized expenses, Vance has frozen the remaining assets in the joint account pending litigation. So, I have nothing? You have your genius, I said. And you have Tabitha. I hope you two are very happy together in whatever cardboard box you end up in. I walked over to where my purse was sitting. I pulled out a small, sleek envelope. However, I said, I'm not a monster. It is your birthday. Stuart's eyes lit up. A glimmer of hope. Meredith. I tossed the envelope onto the table. It slid across the mahogany surface and stopped right in front of him. Open it. He tore it open with trembling hands. He pulled out a piece of paper. It was the bill for tonight's dinner. Asterisk total, $6,450. Gratuity, 20%, $1,290. Total, $7,740. Status, unpaid, asterisk, happy birthday, I said. You wanted the luxury lifestyle. You can pay for it. I canceled my card on file right before I walked in. I can't pay this, he shrieked. My cards are declined. I guess you'll have to wash dishes, I said. Or maybe Tabitha can sell that handbag I bought her. I signaled Henry. They are all yours. I turned around and walked toward the door. Behind me, the chaos erupted. Tabitha was crying. Stuart was yelling at the waiter. Julian and the friends were trying to sneak out but were blocked by security. I walked out of Atelier Rousseau into the cool San Francisco night. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of fog and the ocean. It smelled of freedom. I didn't look back. I didn't go back to the apartment. I checked into the St. Regis. I booked the presidential suite because for the first time in my life, I wasn't saving for a rainy day. The storm had passed. I took a long bath. I ordered room service, fries, and a glass of champagne, and watched bad reality TV. I turned my phone off. But at 4 a.m., the hotel room phone rang. I woke up disoriented. The heavy curtains blocked out the city lights. I fumbled for the receiver. Hello? Is that you? Please don't hang up. It was Tabitha, but not the arrogant, sneering Tabitha from dinner. This was a broken, terrified voice. She was sobbing so hard she could barely speak. What do you want, Tabitha? I asked, sitting up and turning on the lamp. It's Stuart, she choked out. He went crazy, Meredith. After you left the restaurant, they called the police because we couldn't pay. I assumed they would. They kept us there for hours. Julian and the others, they left. They just ran out the back fire exit and left us there. Stuart had to give them his watch. His Rolex. The fake one you bought him? It wasn't fake. I said it was real. I just told him it was fake so he wouldn't ask how I afforded it. Oh God, she wailed. He gave away a real Rolex. Focus, Tabitha. Why are you calling me? We got kicked out. We were on the street and Stuart, he just snapped. He started screaming at me. He said I ruined his life. He said I was He started throwing my clothes. He had my suitcase in the trunk. He threw them into the street. Into a puddle. Meredith, my silk tops. Tragic. And then he tried to grab me. He was shaking me. A passerby sighed and called the cops. They arrested him, Meredith. They took him away in handcuffs. He's in jail. Domestic disturbance and public intoxication. Okay, I said. And I'm alone, she wailed. I'm on the street. It's freezing. I have nowhere to go. My apartment key, it was in Stuart's pocket. The police took his personal effects. I can't get into my place. And you stopped paying the rent, so the landlord changed the code anyway. That sounds like a series of unfortunate events, I said calmly. Meredith, please. I'm your sister. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was jealous. I just wanted what you had. Please, can I come to your hotel just for one night? I'm scared. I listened to her cry. I remembered being 4 years old and giving her my favorite toy because she was crying. I remembered being 16 and taking the blame when she crashed Dad's car. I remembered the Thanksgiving dinner. I remembered the text messages calling me a ball and chain. Tabitha, I said. Do you remember when you called me unremarkable? I didn't mean it. Yes, you did. And you were right. The old Meredith was unremarkable. She was a doormat. But the new Meredith? She's very remarkable, and she's very busy sleeping. Meredith, you can't leave me here. Call Mom. I said, call Mom. She thinks you're a delicate flower. I'm sure she'll drive up to get you. It's only a 3-hour drive. Mom won't answer. It's 4 a.m. Then I guess you'll have to figure it out, I said. You said you wanted Stuart. You have him. He's in a cell at the county jail. Go wait for him there. Visit hours start at 9. Meredith, that's rich to you, I said. I hung up the phone. Then I unplugged it from the wall. I lay back down on the 1,000 thread count pillows. I thought I would feel guilty. I waited for the guilt, but it never came. Instead, I felt a deep, warm sense of peace. I fell back asleep and dreamed of flying. The divorce process was less of a battle and more of a demolition derby where I was driving a tank and Stuart was on a tricycle. He hired a lawyer, a strip mall guy named Richard, who wore ill-fitting suits and smelled like desperation. He couldn't afford anyone else. Vance, on the other hand, brought a team of 5 associates to the deposition. Stuart tried everything. First, he claimed he was a co-founder of MJ Solutions. Vance produced the LLC formation documents signed solely by me and Jocelyn. He produced emails where Stuart referred to my work as their little typing thing. He produced the lack of any investment capital from Stuart. Claim denied. Then he claimed spousal support. He argued that he had sacrificed his own career to support mine, taking on the domestic burden. Vance played a montage of video clips from our home security system, which Stuart forgot existed. Clip after clip of Stuart playing video games while I cooked, cleaned, and worked. Clip after clip of him sleeping until noon. And then the kicker. Vance produced the receipts of me funding his career. The AIA memberships, the software licenses, the office rent for a firm that had no clients. The respondent has been the sole financial provider for the household for 10 years, the judge said, looking over his glasses at Stuart with disdain. Request for support denied. Finally, Stuart tried the fraud angle. He claimed I committed financial infidelity by hiding assets. It's not fraud, Your Honor, Vance argued brilliantly. It was safety. My client protected her assets from a spouse who was actively dissipating marital funds on an extramarital affair. We have proof of the dissipation. He showed the spreadsheet. The Tabitha tax. The judge looked at the numbers. He looked at the postnup. The agreement holds, the judge ruled. Mr. Stuart, you signed it. You are an adult. You cannot claim ignorance of a contract just because you didn't bother to read it. The final settlement was brutal. I kept 100% of the proceeds from the sale of MJ Solutions. I kept the apartment proceeds since I bought it before marriage. Stuart got his car, which I stopped making payments on, so it was about to be repossessed. He got his clothes, and he got half of the joint checking account, which, after Vance deducted the dissipated assets spent on Tabitha, amounted to a debt of $4,000 that he owed me. I'll waive the $4,000, I told Vance. I don't want a check from him. I just want him gone. I saw Stuart one last time in the hallway of the courthouse. He looked older, smaller. The vitality he had talked about was gone. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out. Meredith, he said, stopping me. Tabitha wasn't with him. I heard she had moved back in with our parents and was currently making their lives miserable. Stuart, was it worth it? He asked. Destroying us? Destroying the family? I looked at him. I adjusted my Hermes scarf. I didn't destroy anything, Stuart, I said. I just turned on the lights. You were the one who was ugly in the glare. I miss you, he whispered. Not the money. You. No, you don't, I said. You miss the safety. You miss the person who cleaned up your messes. But she doesn't exist anymore. I walked away. My heels clicked on the marble floor. It was the sound of victory. 6 months have passed since the dinner at Atelier Russo. My life today looks nothing like the life I had. I sold the apartment in San Francisco. It had too many ghosts. I bought a villa in Tuscany. It's a cliché, I know, but clichés are clichés for a reason, because they are wonderful. I have a vineyard, a real one, not a fake boutique one Tabitha would visit. I produce olive oil. I wake up when the sun rises, not because I have to coordinate with London, but because the light over the hills is too beautiful to miss. Jocelyn and I started a new venture. It's a foundation that provides grants and legal aid to women trapped in financially abusive relationships. We call it the Phoenix Project. We help women build secret funds. We help them plan their exits. We help them find their remarkable. I haven't spoken to my parents. I heard through the grapevine that Tabitha is still living with them. They are miserable. Tabitha refuses to work, claiming she has trauma from the divorce, even though we weren't the ones married. She spends their pension. My mother complains to anyone who will listen about her heartless eldest daughter, but I know she secretly misses the checks I used to write. Stuart is living in a studio apartment in Oakland with 3 roommates. He works at a drafting supply store. I hear he tells people he's a consultant between projects. Some lies never die. As for me, I'm dating. His name is Matteo. He owns the vineyard next door. He doesn't know exactly how much money I have, and he doesn't care. He brings me flowers, not because he messed up, but because they are blooming. He asks me about my thoughts, not my bank account. Last week, we were sitting on my terrace, drinking wine, my wine. You have a fire in you, Meredith, he said, tracing the line of my jaw. It's quiet, but it's fierce. It's remarkable. I smiled. I didn't flinch at the word this time. Yes, I said. I suppose I am. Looking back, the most painful part of this journey wasn't the betrayal itself. It wasn't the cheating or the theft. It was the realization that I had participated in my own erasure. For 15 years, I dimmed my light so Stuart wouldn't be blinded. I made myself smaller so Tabitha wouldn't feel crowded. I accepted the label of unremarkable because it was safer than being threatening. But here is the truth I learned. The truth that cost me 15 years and earned me $14 million. You cannot love someone into respecting you. You cannot pay someone into valuing you. And you cannot save people who are determined to drown, especially if they are trying to stand on your shoulders to keep their heads above water. Family isn't just blood. Blood is a biological accident. Family is behavior. Family is reciprocity. If your family treats you like an ATM or a punching bag, they aren't family. They are parasites with a shared genetic code. To the women listening to this, the ones who are hiding money in a coffee can, the ones who are editing HVAC manuals at midnight, the ones who are being told they are boring or nagging or too practical, I see you. You are not unremarkable. You are the engine. You are the foundation. And if they don't appreciate the foundation, maybe it's time to pull the floorboards out and let them see what it's like to fall. My name is Meredith. I am a CEO. I am a millionaire. I am a survivor, and I am remarkably happy. Thank you for listening to my story. Tell me in the comments, if you've ever felt underestimated, like your light was being dimmed, what was your breaking point? Or, what's one piece of advice you'd give to someone feeling like the unremarkable one? I really want to know.